basically about 3 weeks ago, I posted a short film called 1987, and as of now, it's got about 16,000 views, which, wow. I know that's not a lot for YouTube, but if there were 16,000 people standing in front of me right now, I'd be freaking out. So thank you so much for everyone who supported it. To the 13 people who disliked it, I'm just gonna assume that you're Fred Phelps's 13 separate YouTube accounts. So yeah, it's not personal, but really it is. This film was actually a school project for me. It's been my waste film. The actual project had to be cut down to 5 minutes, but because it's a passion project for me, I've got my director's cut, which is a good solid 13. I honestly really didn't expect anyone to watch it aside from like the friends who helped me make it and like my mum and dad. But it's, the people seem to like it, which is really nice. The response has just been overwhelmingly positive. YouTube and Reddit seem to be really big fans. I got voted best director at my school screening, and we've even ended up on a couple people's Letterboxd lists, so that's fun. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go do that, because this video isn't really going to make any sense if you haven't seen it. But if you're stubborn, like myself, and haven't listened to that advice, here's a quick recap. If you have seen it, and you're at this point in the video, skip to this point in the video to skip the recap, because you don't need that, you watched it. Basically, our characters meet at the stroke of midnight at a New Year's Eve party. That's 1986 going into 1987, when Debbie asks Friday to dance, and the two characters just fall head over heels in love with each other. And so they start pursuing this secret relationship. A couple months into this relationship, Debbie purchases 2 train tickets and asks Friday to run away with her. The train tickets, by the way, are due for 11:59 on December 31st. Friday agrees and goes to tell her parents about this great love that she's found. But she receives a very negative response, and so she kind of gets freaked out and she calls the whole thing off with Debbie. Debbie takes this the worst any person could possibly take anything. Both characters spend a little bit of time away from each other, and they have some self-reflection on themselves, their identity, and what the relationship meant to them. And then fast forward to New Year's, the next New Year's, that's 1987 going into 1988, both characters spontaneously decide to use the train ticket that they still have and go to the train station with the hopes that the other one will be there. At the stroke of midnight, the characters reunite and the film ends in the final moments of 1987. So that's a very quick recap of what happens in the movie. Anyway, now going into director's commentary. Now, is it a little bit self-aggrandizing to do a director's cut? Yes, I am delusional to behave as if this is a DVD with a special features section. Is this the 5th video I've uploaded related to 1987? Also yes, but it will probably be the last. I'm gonna try to keep that promise. It'll probably be the last. But anyway, basically a couple people did ask me to do this, so I figured, give the public what they want. So this is my director's cut, my director's deep dive into 1987. So basically the opening of the film is this slow zoom in on a television that's playing old news PSAs about the AIDS crisis. The reason I picked 1987 specifically is because that was the height of the AIDS crisis in Australia. While AIDS isn't necessarily a theme of the film, in fact it's only mentioned once and in a very ignorant and ill-informed way, the AIDS crisis still kind of sets the backdrop for the narrative. While the illness doesn't directly impact our characters, nor did it have the impact on queer women that it had on queer men, the knock-on effect of the AIDS crisis is that it just fueled homophobia, because now queer people weren't just considered deviants, but infectious deviants, which is really something that made the 80s an era that was defined by hardship for the queer community, even more so than the eras that preceded it, because the stigma was just that much further emphasized. Because really, the story of 1987, like the plot structure, it's something that could take place in any time period, really, maybe like anything before 1996, I think. But just because the 80s was such a hard but important time for the queer community, I felt like that was the necessary time period for the film to take place in. Most of the news sources are from the US, which is a shame. I was trying to establish that this was set in Perth, but the issue is Australian accents aren't very panicky, if that makes any sense. Like we've got a very loose jaw, so we sound a bit calmer than a lot of accents. We don't sound like we're really stressed out. Americans, on the other hand, just need to talk like a little bit fast, and they sound very panicky all of the time. So I was able to find a lot of American news PSAs from the 80s that were very fearmongery, or they came off as very stressed out. Like, it's dawned on straight America. That's, oh my god, like, calm down. Whereas all the Australian news PSAs I found, they were kind of talking in this accent. Doesn't sound very scared, because I was trying to capture this sense of fear-mongering and juxtapose it with a love story. However, I did use the infamous Grim Reaper commercial, so we can thank Australia for that. So the opening sequence where Friday's got this monologue where she's like, "Oh, I love Debbie so much." She doesn't sound like that, sorry Frances. Everything is original writing in that script. Like, I wrote all of that myself, except for this fun little Easter egg, the quote.
"Now in my heart, I see clearly, beautiful face shining back on me, stained with love."
Which is actually Sappho, so that's a fun little Easter egg. Debbie also quotes her later on, so watch out for that. But yeah, did put a sneaky little Sappho quote in there. Fun fact, I used the word sapphic on my artist statement because this was a school project. I had to make an artist statement, which is like a written director's commentary. And when I handed it in, my media teachers came back to me and they asked me to explain what the word sapphic meant to them, and it was a very awkward conversation. So just have that information. I don't know what you would do with it, but now you have it. The song that's playing in the intro also happens to be called Love Will Tear Us Apart, which I just felt like this sentiment, it's a really beautiful song, but the sentiment of it I feel like really fits with the overall story, you know? So, you may notice that this scene is out of line in the timeline that I described earlier. Why, yes it is. Why are they breaking up already? Why aren't they at a New Year's party where they meet? This isn't the right order. Well, you'd be right, you cheeky chop. I don't know why I'm talking like this. Let me explain why I did this. So I feel like starting immediately on conflict is always fun, because it creates so many unanswered questions that kind of hooks the audience in, because it's like, why are they breaking up? What's illegal? What's going on? What are we doing? That's the audience voice. That's what the audience sounds like. I figured if I was to start at the New Year's party where they meet, that scene wouldn't really have the same effect as it does when you play it later on, knowing how their relationship turns out. Because I feel like when you see a meet cute right at the beginning, as an audience, we're kind of like, we don't care about these people. We don't know anything about them aside from the short intro you've given about how much you love her kind of thing. There's not really a lot to hook you in. However, a melodramatic breakup scene is always interesting, regardless of how much you know about the characters, because you're kind of seeing them at their worst. Like, that's entertaining for an audience. And I feel like when you've seen that already, you're more likely to stick around and see the characters later in scenes where they are being genuinely very loving towards each other. Because Debbie's actions in this scene don't have any context, she kind of seems like she's just hugely overreacting. But when this scene is followed with scenes like 2 and 4 that show the characters being very genuine and loving towards one another, they can kind of retrospectively give the scene meaning and provide explanation to why Debbie reacted the way she did. Like, you see Debbie at her worst before you see her at her best, and that's kind of what I feel like makes the character a little bit more interesting than her just being a stock love interest. Also, the bag that Debbie used to stuff fish and chips into actually had to be made from scratch. It's a whole lot of cardboard wrapped in plastic, so the oil from the food wouldn't, like, as you can see, there's just like plastic in here. It's so that the oil from the food wouldn't destroy the cardboard that it's built out of. And basically I just hot glued a whole lot of green silk to these cardboard sides. And I put a little feather boa trim on, and I gave it little like pearl handles. So yeah, so I was trying to find a bag that would work for the scene, and I realized I had to make one. Because nothing was going to be like structurally sound enough to have fish and chips like repeatedly stuffed into it between takes. But now that we've just seen the utter train wreck of a breakup scene, we're shown this scene between Debbie and Friday that contextualizes the scene before. That way we're watching this scene and knowing that the characters are due to fall out, it creates a very different emotional response in the audience, because it's a very sweet scene that's designed to make you feel good, but ultimately you know it's coming to an end, or so you think. You're kind of trying not to get your hopes up too much about this relationship because you've just seen the characters break up at a later date. But it's still the way that it's kind of hard not to get invested in the characters. So people keep asking me, what movie are they watching? Because Friday only gives a very vague clues that are...
Look, see, they're on a farm, and she's bossing him around on the farm.
A lot of people thought I made up these lines and they don't actually come from a movie, just so that Friday would have something to say about kissing, so there'd be like an awkward energy in the car. That's not true. How dare you accuse me of that? She is actually referencing a movie that is very famous, very well known, and came out in 1987. I'll give you 3 seconds. They're on a farm. She's bossing him around on the farm. They're kissing on the farm. It's The Princess Bride. They're at the drive-ins. And they're watching The Princess Bride. Initially, I wanted to edit it so that, like, you could see the reflection of the movie on the windscreen. But it ended up looking really cringe. And I also just imagined there'd be, like, a million copyright issues with that. So I didn't do that, but the movie that she's referencing is The Princess Bride. Also, when the actresses showed up to my house, I didn't know exactly what scene they were filming, because I said scene 2. But I guess I hadn't properly communicated that the timeline was messed around. So they thought it was something completely different, and they showed up and they panicked because they didn't realize they were going to be kissing each other that day, and they both ate my toothpaste. I'm exposing you guys as toothpaste eaters. A lot of people have asked me how I managed to film at a drive-in. I didn't. Basically, a family friend has an old combi camper van, so we parked it in the driveway and blocked up all of the windows with black blankets. So none of the light, you couldn't see out of any of the windows. And then we put a whole lot of studio lights right in front of the windscreen. So all of the light that was going into the car was only coming through the front. In a couple scenes from behind, in some of the footage, you could see 3 lights. But then I animated over it so that it was just one square. The speaker hanging in the window that they have in old drive-ins, that was actually a light fixture that I'd bought from Good Sam's for 50 cents, and I put a little bit of felt over it. So it looked like a speaker, but it's not a speaker.
For when I'm with you, for a moment, there are no words in me.
Fun fact, my friend was on the yearbook committee for my school, and she was like, I'm gonna put all the gay shit in. So she made this collage of everyone's media projects, but had like a big a big section for just this frame. And the school censored it. It was considered inappropriate. So that's cool. I'm officially a censored director, but that's kind of fun. Shot of Friday screaming in the street. That is taken directly from Lady Bird. I'll be completely honest about it, taken directly from Lady Bird. My dad is obsessed with this Walkman. Every time this shot comes up, he's like, that's my Walkman! So that's my dad's Walkman, you guys. Basically, this shot right here in front of the church that kind of zooms in on Friday, but the background is like moving out, she's moving in. That's called a vertigo zoom. Basically, I built this really shitty dolly. If you're not a media kid, a dolly is basically, it's a tripod with wheels on it. Basically, I spent like $50 at Bunnings and I built a little moving ramp and some tracks for it to go on. That's Butch moment of the year for me. I used a whole power tool. Basically what you do is you move the tripod backwards, but you zoom the camera inwards. So that way the camera's physically moving backwards, but it's digitally moving in. And what that does is it makes the background kind of move at a different rate to what you're focusing on. Cool, fun, practical effect. She's pretty on the nose with this one, Friday. I say that as if I did not write the script. I don't get to be upset at the character for being on the nose with what she's saying. So basically the scene is supposed to capture this feeling of compulsory heterosexuality. That notion of kind of like, yeah, my life would just be easier if I just pretended to be straight. Like, that's fine. I know that's something that I definitely struggled with a lot. Kind of the idea that your actions don't have to reflect your feelings, that you can just force yourself into an easier lifestyle. But then you're presented with this ultimatum of, do I want my life to be easy or do I want my life to be happy? Which isn't really an ultimatum that should exist, but I think as queer people, it's definitely one that we're prone to presenting ourselves with. And I wanted to capture that in a way that made sense for broader audiences while still appealing to the main target demographic, which is queer audiences, obviously. Use of blue. So basically, I tried this thing and it didn't work, admittedly. Blue in this movie is supposed to be symbolic of like repression. It didn't really go how I wanted it to go. I can accept that. I feel like it wasn't as obvious as I would have liked it to be, but that was my intention. As you can see, the character that I like to refer to as the Compet Monster and her husband, they're both dressed in blue in front of a blue house. There's a blue cross hangs over Friday's shoulder in the background that's kind of looming. I think that of all the scenes where I try to use blue, this one definitely works the best. See blue pop up a couple times again later, but it doesn't really have the same effect, but the intention was there. Basically, see blue throughout it. It's probably something to do with gay bad, gay sad. That's what blue means in this world. For scene 4, I was really trying to utilize cliche. which is what every director says after they've done something cliche, isn't it? Yeah, probably. But I do have purpose for it. The happier scenes, and I feel like it's more effective to put a meet cute, as I said before, putting the meet cute at this point in the movie as opposed to in the beginning of the movie. It has so much more impact because you know what's in store for the characters and you already feel a little bit more attached to them than you would if the meet cute was right at the beginning of the movie, if that makes any sense. It's supposed to be somewhat self-aware cliche in this scene, the idea that they're dancing and suddenly they're the only two people in the room, because it's one of the happiest scenes, so I wanted to embrace that kind of like 80s John Hughes movie kind of aesthetic to it, because in this scene, it's not only set in 1987, but it's set in an 80s teen movie. Like, this is not a realistic depiction of reality, but it's not supposed to be. And that's kind of reinforced by, like, the kind of whole, like, Cinderella syndrome of, like, Debbie's mum's here, so she's like, oh, it's past midnight, I have to go. And Friday's like, oh, but what is your name? I'm Debbie. And then she leaves and then she has to track her down and everything. It's a very romanticized scene, and it's supposed to be. Not just to juxtapose, because obviously like the scene before it was of a sadder nature, so you don't really want to just pile sadness on top of sadness for no reason, because that actually just numbs the audience. Also, this scene required a lot of set dressing because you see the inside of both characters' rooms, but both of their bedrooms are actually my bedroom, just different corners of it. Basically what I did for Friday is, it's actually this corner of my room, but I put a little boombox here and I put a Bowie poster here. You couldn't really see it in the frame, but it was a Bowie poster, and I hung her jacket up on the wall. And then over on the other side of the room, I made Debbie's bedroom. I just changed out my sheets so they were a bit girlier, so they fit Debbie's personality a little bit more. I also put floral fabric on the wall to create wallpaper. It's something I really try to avoid, is white walls in movies. Not necessarily like walls that are white, but just walls that are blank, because you can have them in real life and it's fine, but it looks really bad in movies, at least in my own opinion. I don't really like white walls. The rooms actually come up later again, and it's the same thing but reversed. This time it was Friday's bedroom on the bed and Debbie's bedroom in the corner, but I'll get back to that when it's relevant. Scene 5. Look at what's come back. It's the color blue. That means we're in for another scene about repression. Oh my god, I love color symbolism. Many people watch this and come to me and they're like, why are they feeding her Windex? Don't you know? Drinking Windex will make you straight. Drink your heterosexual Windex juice. The meaning behind this scene. Now, I realize that Friday's lesbian throuple mothers disowning her for being a lesbian is a bit ironic. But that is not the point. It is supposed to be a metaphor, I promise. As a general take, anyone throughout the film who's got a scratched over face is a metaphor for Friday's internal conflict. She doesn't literally have 3 homophobic lesbian throuple mums. This scene was supposed to convey the idea of conditional love, because there's a very sort of maternal warmness that the lesbian throuple mums have towards Friday in the beginning of the scene, but once she mentions Debbie, that warmness is like immediately retracted. The food in front of her is taken off the table, the throuple mums start packing up her clothes and putting a jacket on her back. It's only when Friday backs down that she gets her food back and is once again welcome at the table. I guess I chose to only have female figures here because more of my female friends were ready to shoot that day. I also wanted to convey that kind of like 1950s gender norms and a nuclear family look about Friday's visions, and you can see that with the Compet Monster as well. Because if we're following like the Back to the Future timeline, that's the era that Friday's parents would have grown up in, so it's very likely that those are the kind of traditionalist values that she would have been raised with. So that's kind of the standard that she feels almost guilty that she's deviating from. This is kind of what she's been told is the pinnacle of womanhood, and we can see that with the Compet Monster as well, that vision of herself as a nuclear wife and mother. And so the fact that she deviates from that, she kind of feels almost as if her queerness expels her from womanhood, and that's something that I kind of wanted to convey in this scene. So I don't think it would have had the same effect if there were men moving the stuff around as well. However, I do get that it's very ironic that her lesbian throuple mums do not support her. In my official artist statement, I did say that Friday's outfit here is supposed to be a more feminine version of Freddie Mercury's Live Aid concert look that occurred about 2 years prior to the film setting. As Freddie being a very prominent queer figure at the time, it would make sense for Friday to idolize him and feel this kind of sense of power in mimicking his style right before having a very difficult conversation about her identity with her family. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, the actress just brought the wrong costume, but we decided to go with it because she was already wearing a very 80s outfit which happened to look a lot like Freddie Mercury's Live Aid look. What's this? What color is Debbie wearing? Is that blue? How's Debbie feeling? Repressed, maybe? I don't know, you tell me. It doesn't work in the later scenes, but it worked in scene 3. That's what matters. But the blue here is supposed to be Debbie feeling repressed. Being sneaky and filming on location, the bathroom here is also fully just a public train station restroom that we were hiding out in the morning. We did not pay for this location, but that's how we do it in the industry. And it's cool. It's only cool when I do it. Not cool when Sofia Coppola and her $4 million budget does it. Yeah, people kept walking in to go to the bathroom, get to keep stop filming to let people piss. Yeah, it was really, really awkward. So basically, Debbie's friends, Susie and Jennifer, are looking into these massive mirrors, and Debbie's looking into this very small mirror. And it's supposed to be this allegory about self-perception and how that can be really limited for queer people, particularly when you're in the closet. You aren't really allowed to have the same self-perception that the straight cis people around you get to have. Debbie's friends, Susie and Jennifer, are having a conversation in these massive mirrors when her friend Susie says this.
No, you don't get it. I don't like Derek, but I want Derek to like me because Diana likes Derek and Diana is a manipulative bitch.
Which is, it's a very ironic thing to say because what you're doing is inherently manipulative, so it's a really weird thing to accuse another person of being manipulative, but basically, it's supposed to be a really ludicrous conversation to have. It's an insane plan. That's supposed to be the whole point of the scene. Jennifer and Susie have this just grand sense of freedom to talk about their own love lives in a way that gets to a point of just absurdity where you're just kind of abusing the fact that you have straight privilege at this point. Whereas Debbie doesn't have that. She's restricted to a very small mirror. She doesn't get to see her whole face. And she doesn't really have that same sense of identity that the other girls get to have. So that's supposed to be kind of the whole point of the scene. And then, yeah, basically there's that whole conflict with Friday in which Jennifer and Susie were talking about Friday negatively and Debbie didn't make the decision to speak up because she thought, guess better to blend in a little bit more. It's for her own self-preservation, but Friday heard the whole thing and recognizes that Debbie didn't stand up for her and gives her back a scrunchie. Then 3 of those characters leave and Debbie's left in the restroom alone and she has that mirror to herself, and so it's the first time in the scene that she really gets to see her whole face. She gets to see herself in the big mirror, and it's that moment of self-reflection for her because she's finally really looking at herself, but she doesn't really like what she sees. She doesn't like the person that she's become from being around these people. She doesn't like that she's being quiet. So that's what the whole scene was supposed to be about. It didn't necessarily come off that way, but I think, you know, for a first attempt, pretty good. Scene 7. Making a location look like something else again. What I was talking about in scene 4, how Friday's bedroom and Debbie's bedroom were just different corners of my bedroom. I did exactly the same thing for scene 7. So basically Friday's bed is just my bed, like it was Debbie's bed in scene 4, except I changed out the sheets again and I put fairy lights on it that were different, so you couldn't really tell. I also just framed it from a different angle so you didn't see the same bed head. The same thing with Debbie's room. Basically to make the same corner, this corner, Debbie's bedroom, like I'd made it Friday's bedroom before, I put up this poster. I printed off a bunch of stuff at Officeworks, just replaced some stuff out and made it look more like Debbie's room. Then I just flipped the screen in post so it looked like it was coming from a different corner. And yeah, that's how you make the same location look like a different location. That big zoom shot of Debbie on the couch at the New Year's party, everyone around her is kind of having fun and she's not, that's taken in exactly the same place as all of scene 5. Just moved stuff out, just changed furniture around. Yeah, it's super easy to make a location look like something else. As you can see in the big zoom shot, what color is the big zoom shot? Say it with me, folks, it's blue. Debbie's feeling repressed. She's wearing a blue shirt. But guess what? She puts a red jacket over it. No more repression. It's so bad. It's such a bad allegory. But that's what it was going for. I still think the zoom shot looks really lovely, but it doesn't convey the meaning that I wanted it to. When I was brainstorming the shot, I was very adamant about having kind of a spotlight on Debbie and everyone else being in this very fun party scene, having a lot of good time, and Debbie's in like a normal lighting, everyone else is in party light. I did watch one too many Wes Anderson movies and go, yeah, I want a suitcase shot. Give me 2 suitcase shots. It being a happy scene again, I wanted to lean into cliche a bit more. Thankfully it was raining, which is not something the filmmakers say a lot, but thankfully it was raining and they were kind of like running around and it's raining at the train station and everything. It's like, oh, they meet again and it's raining. It's so romantic. I feel like it really added to the train station scene because, you know, it's all, the sky was just this really beautiful purple color. I thought it was really lovely. There were a couple things that I would do differently. This project has definitely been a learning curve for me. And in my perfect little idealistic fantasy, I would love to someday adapt it into a feature film and just utilize all 12 months of 1987. Like have a chapter for each instead of it just being the 7 months. 1987, I used 7 months. Crazy. Oh my, I just realized that! It's 7 chapters! Okay, that's crazy. Anyway, I would make a 12-month version of 1987 if I had the opportunity to adapt it into a feature. If I were to lengthen it, I'd really love to expand on Debbie's character a lot more and have more of a co-protagonist film structure. It being a short, I kind of had to let Debbie take a backseat by making her a love interest and Friday the protagonist, as opposed to having a duo protagonist structure, which is not really something you can do so much with a short. She does get that little moment of self-reflection at the end of scene 6, but it's not much. If I had the opportunity to extend it into a feature, I'd love to go deeper into her experience as a queer woman and how it could differ from Friday's. Maybe there's a guy in her life that she struggles to understand why she isn't interested in or something like that. In typical John Hughes style 80 movies fashion, I'd love to do a prom scene. That would be so much fun. I have this idea of this shot of like Friday and Debbie are dancing with their respective dates, but they're just making eye contact with each other, and it's super awkward, but it would be kind of bittersweet, you know? Maybe they do that, and then halfway through they're like, let's leave the prom. All my homies hate the prom. Let's go out and have our own fun, and they're just like walking around the town in their ball dresses. I think that'd be really sweet. I also have this vision of like a cutaway to Debbie waiting at a bus stop after the events of scene 1 and just like sobbing and eating fish and chips out of her purse. I also want more scenes of Debbie and Friday's time together, because while I think that the intro and the second and fourth scene kind of provide enough evidence that they're, you know, very in love and very cute together, I think the audience would need more to root for them if it were a feature film. Like, I don't think that those scenes are really enough to stand up. I don't have a ghost, my cat just knows how to open doors. Anyway, I don't know how to end this. So bye. See ya.